So Europe willingly cut itself off much of its lifeblood for its manufacturing from Russia, just that energy. Are they going to be willing to do the same to China? Europe was damaged so much from cutting themselves off with Russia. If they cut themselves off from China, then it's like you're completely dependent on the United States now, and the U.S. is just going to use and abuse you, and then you're going to be left with nothing.
Yeah.
And so, do you think they will go that far, or do you think there will be a break?
Well, they've gone a good ways down that road. I mean, so far they have complied with U.S. demands, for sanctions or higher tariffs, like on the electric vehicles, and then very recently, of course, there was essentially the seizure of that Chinese company in the Netherlands. And they did later. The news came out, which is not at all surprising, that it was done at the behest of the U.S. Again, and then China immediately responded. This company, it was there in the Netherlands, and it was essentially a subsidiary of a Chinese company, a larger Chinese company, and so the larger Chinese company declared that they would cease to support this company, which really makes it, perhaps will render it unprofitable. So they're going to end up with a company that's not even viable. Another loss for Europe. But this is where they're going, and they don't show any signs of really changing. I guess they showed some resistance. Again, they wanted the U.S. to go ahead with 100% tariffs on China, but Trump, you could say, essentially called their bluff and said, yeah, we'll do that if you go first. And they didn't, they're reluctant. Now there's a question, though. I mean, there's something that Trump came up with recently that he said, or at least this is reported, that he is going to propose, like, using the tariffs on China, the revenues that are raised through those tariffs, to fund the Ukraine war. And that could be something that the Europeans would go for. But the Europeans apparently would have to go along with and impose their own tariffs on China.
Why would they take such a risk? Don't they understand how damaging that is? What are they so afraid of? Or why are they afraid if the U.S. empire collapses? I know they're they're supposedly the beneficiaries, but they're being forced to be in this, NATO, how much protection is it really offering them? And they're forced to spend now, they're trying to push up to 5% of their GDP to buy overpriced weapons that we don't have enough of, that don't work very well, instead of,
Oh, no.
What's the argument?
It's very sorry. It's a very sorry spectacle. It's just the current crop of European leaders are just seem to have unable to actually think beyond vassalship to the U.S., that they have become mentally, they have become vassals of the U.S. And I think it's the result of a long process and a deliberate effort, actually, on part of the U.S. to cultivate people that were just devoted to U.S. leadership. And it seems to have succeeded. Again, it was not even too long ago. Even if we go like 10 years in the past, we had people like Merkel that were kind of transition figures. They were halfway there, but they still showed some sort of independence. Like, for example, she did support Nord Stream in spite of U.S. pressure. And then you go another 10 years or so in past, and you found people that were really independent. Again, we had the French president, I guess, was it Mitterrand at that time? I hope I remember that correctly, who opposed the invasion of Iraq, quite openly. But now you're just not going to find that. It's just whatever the U.S. chooses to do. All these leaders have been replaced with neocons that look to U.S. hegemony, and it's been a process of kind of mental subordination, you could say. It's hard to explain how it could have happened, but it's happened. That's what we have.
I mean, I think it's quite pervasive just amongst European people in general. I talked to, a few of my friends. I have one buddy that lives in Brussels, and he was saying that, just, when it comes to Russia, it's like everybody is all on the same page. Maybe he's in Brussels, is probably the belly of the beast there. But there's also, I remember something. I have a good friend in Norway And I remember talking to him a long time ago, and he was saying that, like, well, we love America because we'd much rather be ruled by America than by China. And I just thought that was such a weird thing to say. I was like, what do you mean? Dude, how about you don't be ruled by anybody? You're Norway. You're way up here. What are you talking about?
Yeah.
You know, like this. But there was that, just sort of that mentality. It's like, well, if it's not the Americans, they're more similar to us. I like their movies and their comedies. It's fun. Yeah. I don't like the Chinese, so we better stick with it. Like that's almost, I think, sometimes the mindset people have. Like, well, if it's not the Americans, it's not great with the Americans, but it'd be way worse under the Russians or under the Chinese. Right. Europe has this mentality that they have to be under somebody. Yeah. At least I think it is pervasive, not just within the elite. It's just, and I wonder, is that just an effect of post World War II, or is that just a product of European, feudalism and vassal statehood, just the way that our civilization developed, which is just a lot different than the way that Chinese civilization developed, for example.
Right. Well, again, for decades, Europe was entirely dependent on the U.S. for its security, through the Cold War. That NATO actually served a purpose. And you can say that this is a consequence of this, but it's still, I don't think it really explains. Maybe, this is a root of the problem, that, again, there was, at least among certain Europeans, this, there was this tendency developed, more than a tendency. It just became a reflex. It became, for them, just axiomatic that, okay, we simply have to follow the U.S., for our, we're dependent on them. Without them, somebody else is going to rule over us. And again, like if you're going back to the 1960s or 1970s, that wasn't such a ridiculous thought. Maybe the Soviet, if war broke out, the Soviet Union could really have the ability, if the Americans were not there, to occupy all of Europe and to impose their will as they had imposed on the Warsaw Pact. But those years are long gone. And you would think, with the fall of the Soviet Union, beginning with Gorbachev and his appeal to a common European home, that there would have been a response to that. And the rise of the EU was actually a chance to establish kind of a European independence. Now we have our chance. Now it's over. We had those years of the Cold War. That has come to an end. Now Europe can actually become, stand on its own 2 feet. But that's not what we've seen, and I find it difficult to explain. I know that there actually have been real efforts, again, by the U.S., by the CIA and so on, to actually cultivate this dependence, and a lot of those those didn't cease with the end of the Cold War. They continued. And you can point to that. But it just seems like if you had, there has to be something wrong with the Europeans themselves to have actually submitted and allowed that to have happened. There was right. Just a certain apathy and just sort of just a lack of drive and self-respect. Again, like you just look at the Germans and say, how can you let this happen? I think clearly the Americans were behind the Nord Stream explosion, the destruction of the Nord Stream. But even if it wasn't the Americans, and you go with this other story that they've come up with, that it was the Ukrainians, why aren't you, up in arms about that? So, well, they just destroyed our, basically our most important energy infrastructure. And, well, what can you do about it? There should simply be outrage about that. It just seems to me, no matter what, even if you favored a different sort of energy mix or whatever, you cannot let other countries attack your vital infrastructure. And you should respond, like you're an actual sovereign nation, self-respecting people. But it's just not there. They don't seem to be a self-respecting people.
Well, let's see how far it'll go. I mean, if they're willing to just be hoisted on their own petard, I don't know if that's used right. But,
well, to some extent, so you can.
But I will see if they try to cut ties with China same way with Russia. It's just
right. Well, there are signs of
making their own noose, and they're just stepping into the gallows.
Right.
It's crazy.
Right. I'd say, again, it's painful to watch, but there are signs. There are reasons to not to despair. Let's put it that way. I mean, there is Hungary, there is Slovakia, there is now we have the Czech Republic, which to some extent too is joining that dissident group. You have movements within some countries. The AfD, maybe it has its less appealing sides, but it seems to be. I've heard a lot of these people, like for example on Glenn Deason's show, AfD members, and they're very intelligent, and they really seem to understand what's going on, and they are proposing a true alternative when it comes to foreign policy. And
Yeah,
so
but
there are these movements. Europe hasn't died, but but there is too much apathy. There is still this fundamental lack of respect, self-respect on the part of so many Europeans, and we still have this political class that's just slavish in its attitude to the U.S.
Yeah, but the thing is, I feel like even if the AfD or the National Front or whoever it is, one of these populist parties that wants to have a more independent foreign policy and more sovereignty, I think though these parties are often viewed as such extremists because of the establishment has done such a good job of labeling that even if they do come into power, I just feel like you're going to have like a mini societal rifts. There's so little mini civil wars popping up. Like these are people that just, if you mention the AfD or the Front National, they think they're straight up, worse than Hitler. A lot of people just think that they're Nazis. And I don't know much about these politics. I don't want to get into any of this stuff. But the fact of the matter is that these are the parties that do want an independent foreign policy in general, that don't want to continue the war in Ukraine, for example, and want to restore relations with China and Russia. They are just viewed this way. So I just don't see it working out.
You're right. It's a real problem. Well, first of all, one reason that they haven't come to power, like the Front National, it's the National Rally now. It used to be the Front
National
National.
Rally. Yeah.
Yeah.
It sounded cooler the way I said
it. I guess it's the Rassemblement National or something, but we'll just call it the National Rally.
Okay.
Actually, if it wasn't for a lot of kind of shady dealings during the last election, they would be the ruling party now in France. The AfD is the most popular party. Everybody agrees now in Germany. Yet they've been kept out entirely from let's say the corridors of power. And there's no sign that the establishment is going to let them. They will. For the reasons that you give, the political class is going to fight tooth and nail to keep them out, and they'll resort to all kinds. We've already seen the various things they've done. The charges or the conviction against Marine Le Pen, efforts to actually ban the AfD, and I think if it comes to that, it looks like either of these powers really might take power on the verge of it. Who knows? We may just have a coup d'etat, or maybe declare democracy is temporarily suspended in order to save democracy. So it is. It's going to be hard. It's going to, even though we do have this establishment that shows no signs of any reassessment. There's no self-reflection. They seem very much committed to this self-destructive course. And if they are challenged, they will do what they can. Again, we've seen what's happened in Romania, Moldova, and I think that that's become the new playbook. It's just like if you do have a real challenge to our party, we will suppress the opposition. We will, we will do what it takes and to keep them out of power. Well, there's no dirty trick that they won't resort to.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, I think it can be kind of just frustrating watching the Europeans. But I feel like, once things really start to be, I think they're able to just keep it going because life hasn't gotten really awful for most people in Western Europe and the United States. So they're just kind of able to just keep the status quo. But at some point in time, I think what we'll see is that when their pocketbooks are really getting hit, and it could be even, I don't know how soon this would happen, but I mean, if the winter is really tough, we might see energy prices go real high, and then I don't know what's going to happen with this trade war with China, but if the whole Western financial system starts to collapse, that might be the only thing that wakes people up. Because I think it's easy for us, it's frustrating for us to to watch it, because we're so aware of the problem. We're just watching it. But for most people, they don't see the house burning down. They just kind of feel like something's a little off.
Yeah, right. And again, for most people say, actually, it seems I got to tighten my belt a little bit, but I'm still doing pretty well. And I can buy, I can still get those, the things that I want at the store, and go home and watch Netflix, and
right.
And at the end of the year, there's still a little bit of money in my account, and that's fine as far as I'm concerned. But at some point where they can't even do that, I think maybe that's when they'll hit the streets. I don't know.
Right. I think so. Well, it doesn't look rosy for Europe, but
especially for Europe. I mean, again, the U.S. economy, there are obviously a lot of dark clouds on the horizon. But Europe is already in trouble. The recession has already hit parts of Europe, in particular Germany.
Okay. Well, do we want to talk about? I don't know if you want to go into some updates on Russia, just in terms of the front lines, or if we want to finish up on Venezuela or something on Gaza, Iran.
I guess I wanted to. Maybe just first, let's mention Venezuela. There's still there. Recently, there have been, I guess the U.S., what they're doing, that seems to be their strategy, is they're just increasing the pressure on Venezuela. So they've actually had, their, I guess, I don't know what aircraft. It actually escapes me right now. But they've sent their, their military aircraft right up to the edge of Venezuelan airspace, and then turned back. They've sent helicopters up. They're doing what they can, I think, just to increase the pressure. And then Trump came out with a statement recently that, the CIA is there, which is kind of a weird thing. Usually you don't say the CIA is there, but it's just maybe, again, a part of an effort to add to the pressure, and maybe to get somebody within Venezuela to act on behalf of the U.S., to carry out a coup, to claim that bounty on the head of Maduro. So I think that we're going to see this until finally, it becomes a direct military action, an operation of some kind. And Trump has openly threatened this. He said that, we're going to go from the sea to the land. So we'll see. Anyway, it looks like there's no reason to think that that we're going to avoid some kind of operation in Venezuela, unfortunately. And then, let's say, with just comment quickly on Gaza. We find Trump, we've said, like, the only way that this 20-point plan could possibly be implemented is if the Trump really pushes it hard and just keeps the pressure up on Netanyahu. And what we've seen so far, I think, is we've seen a little bit of that. Like, for example, the Gazans, Hamas is supposed to return the remains of the dead hostages. And they've returned some of them. I think maybe 10 at this point, but still less than half of the hostages. And they say they're having trouble finding them. And that does not seem like some sort of wild excuse. The Israelis have basically leveled, all of Gaza, or something like 80% of it. And so they're just piles of rubble. You get back, they don't even really recognize where they are. Well, we had them here. Was it here, or was it over the next block? And then if it's here, how are we going to get down there? It was he and those who were guarding him were in the basement of that building that was destroyed, and we don't have the equipment. It's going to take a while. And some of those bodies will never be found. Now, Netanyahu and his people have been trying to use as an excuse, to say, okay, clearly Hamas is not abiding by the ceasefire, or they're not holding up their part of the bargain, rather, and then so this is, it's off. That's what Netanyahu wants to happen. But Trump has actually avoided going there and has said actually in defense of Hamas that it's going to take a while or whatever. So it's clear that, he to some extent, he is keeping the pressure on Netanyahu. He's trying to make it go forward. But on the other hand, we have the Israelis just clearly violating the ceasefire. They're still killing people every day. Instead of dozens of people, they're killing, we're talking about single figures, but they're still killing people every day. And they're also not, letting in the humanitarian aid, and they've closed the Rafah crossing, so these are major violations, and we don't hear anything from Trump about that. So, this is what we're going to see, and we'll see. I'm afraid that Trump over time will lose his enthusiasm. He'll be beaten down by all the people around him, and that he'll eventually accede to Netanyahu's demands and say, "Oh yeah, Hamas is in violation. Too bad. I had the most incredible peace plan ever, but Hamas, and because of their stupidity or whatever, Israel is going to be forced to go in again." We're not there yet, but there's a danger. I think that's what we'll see down the road.
Well, did you see that tweet that he truthed on Truth Social? He tweeted out yesterday, "If Hamas continues to kill people in Gaza, which was not the deal, capital D,
right,
we will have no choice but to go in and kill them. Thank you for your attention to this matter."
Right. Now, he said contradictory things about this. He also said, well, there's some bad people that Hamas needs to deal with, and they do have to maintain security. He actually did say that. But then, I think he most recently came out with his tweet. So, we're getting conflicting signals, and that's not a good sign. We're right at the beginning of this, and already he's shaky on this.
I think Trump's brain is just mush, and nobody's, everybody around him they're all sycophants, so they're just telling him what he wants to hear, and it makes Trump feel good, and he just whoever's whispering in his ear, and he's able to regurgitate it, and then he just makes up the other 10% that he can't figure out by himself.
Yeah, or maybe the other 50%.
Maybe 50%. Yeah, maybe 50% made up, 50% someone plants some type of seed, and then. Yeah, so it's just, I feel like we need to wake up from just this crazy dream. It's not quite like idiocracy. It's even worse. It's like insanity is what it is. It's just we've gone just completely insane.
Yeah, no, it is. I don't think you can really exaggerate, the insanity in this case.
It's only been 9 months of this presidency. Right. we got almost 40 months still to go.
Yeah,
and months left.
Right, and unfortunately, is again, what this presidency followed another presidency that was pretty insane.
And the last
too.
one was
That's
just.
right.
There's a whole thing. It's just like, do you think we're going to make it to the end?
I don't know.
Do you think we'll have another election here in this country? I mean.
I think so,
one.
but there are reasons to worry.
I'm at this point, just like, well,
God, who knows?
It's almost like, we all know it's collapsing. We all know it's imploding. I hope we can just all realize that we don't really need the government, that we can take care of each other, and that things don't fall apart and go into pure chaos, and then we have warlords roaming through Appalachia. It's we'll see. We'll see. I hope we can all stick together and come out fine. But just the fact, what the government's still shut down, right?
Last I checked.
Well, I don't know. Yeah, it's just our government shut down, but we're going to go to war with Venezuela. We want to shoot missiles, Tomahawk missiles into Russia. We want to engage in this trade war with China, even though they make all of our stuff. Just, I don't know. We want to go to war with Iran, I guess, as well, and we'll help. We'll get the genocide started back in Gaza before too long, and it's just I don't even have a punchline. It's just it's just
right. Yeah, what can you say? Yeah,
what can you say? Okay, well, let's try to have a good weekend at least.
Okay, well,
okay.
Yeah, again,
Anything else you want to say?
Yeah, again, we're going to talk more about what's happening, like on the battlefields in Ukraine. But again, I think this meeting, the scheduled meeting between between Trump and Putin was very important in the whole issue of the tomahawks. So, that's why that just came out of the blue. And then,
Right.
but we'll get to it.
Well, I think it's a great thing. And, the markets show that, right? Like I said, 3 days ago, it was at 32% chance of shooting Tomahawk missiles. It might have been by the end of the year, Tomahawk missiles going into Russia. And then after the phone call and the meeting, it's dropped down to 11% when I checked this morning. So,
but again, it's just
who knows what poly? It's not a huge market cap on that bet, but
right.
But who knows? Yeah, it's just crazy. But even then, even if it is 11%, that's just still crazy.
Right.
that's
and then even if again Putin succeeds in persuading Trump, who knows how long that's going to stick in his mind at some point.
Do you think that the Tomahawk missiles? Do you think they're already there in Ukraine?
I don't think so. I know a lot
That's
of people think. That's
what they did with the ATACMS.
Right. That has happened in the past. But I guess, who knows? It's just like, we're never told what's actually going on. I have no idea. They could be, again, that has happened with other weapon systems. They could be. But again, these are so sensitive that maybe I don't know that the decision has actually been made. We'll see.
Okay. All right. Well, any final words?
No, I think we've said enough.
Okay. All right. Thanks a lot, Dad. All right.
Okay.
Have a good rest of your day and a great weekend.
Okay. Very good.
All right. Bye-bye.
Bye-bye.